welcome to this final in our series of webinars looking at the differences between the version 8.4 and the version 9 of the Australian curriculum. This is the last in the series, and this one focuses specifically on digital literacy, or what we used to call the ICT general capability. If you're interested in the previous 4 webinars in the series, where we break down the differences between version 8 and 9 as it applies to digital technologies curriculum, I will put the link in the chat for the YouTube channel where we have uploaded all of those recordings. This one is being recorded, so feel free to chat with us in the chat. Yeah, you'll also be able to access this after the webinar takes place. I'd like to introduce the people that are presenting today. My name is Nathan. I'm the Professional Learning Coordinator at DLTV. DLTV is the subject association for digital technologies teachers in Victoria. And one of the things we'll discuss, I'm sure will come up today, is that some Victorian teachers use Victorian curriculum, other Victorian teachers use Australian curriculum. And so the rise of this digital literacy in the Australian curriculum will have an impact on both of those groups to some extent. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. So my name's Anna Kinane, and I am joining you from Brisbane in Queensland. I am one of the writers of the original version 8 of the Australian Curriculum Digital Technologies. And this, I suppose, curriculum is something that's very close to my core business, and I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit of information about the digital literacy capability, which is now in its next iteration. So thanks, Nathan.
Thanks. And Bruce?
Hi, everyone. Bruce Yuter. I'm Head of Education Curriculum at Grok Academy, and we've been really thrilled to work alongside Nathan and DLTV to put this series of webinars together. Like Anna, I worked on version 8.4 of digital technologies, and have also been involved with some of the refinements of version 9 before it went out to publish as well. So it's great to be here and to share with you our thoughts and some updates on how the curriculum has evolved between the last version and this one, and then to throw around some thinking about what that might mean for those of you in Victoria who are working on the Victorian curriculum as well. So Nathan, over to you.
Thanks, Bruce. So we'll go on to the next slide, I actually think Anna's going to lead us off with this, but we've got a question for you. That question is, there's a lot of this new terminology now around digital literacy, digital well-being, and our question is, what do you think digital literacy is? How would you define it, and how would you use the term? What do you think it means for students to be digitally literate? We'd encourage you, if you like, to put some thoughts in the chat, and I'll hand over to Anna to sort of see how we go here. But yeah, please do use the chat to put in your suggestions of what you think it means for students to be digitally literate.
Yes, thanks, Nathan. So we're really interested to see your responses here, because as you are familiar with the ICT capability, or as we are now referring to it, digital literacy, there's a new iteration of what this looks like, but we all know what it means to be literate. So what does it mean to be digitally literate? And if we are the teachers who are expecting our students to develop their capabilities, what does that look like? So just try to think about that and pop your maybe 1 or 2 words or a sentence in the chat window, as Nathan mentioned. We might have some shy participants here.
For those watching the recording, it's a Friday afternoon with 1 week to go in term 3, so we understand that people are a little at the end of their tethers at this point in the term, especially a year like this.
So what we might do then, Nathan, is we have prepared a response for you, and in our very next slide, what I have done is there's a very long version of the definition of digital literacy on the Australian Curriculum website, but we have summarised it for you. And as you can see here, there's no surprises. We're looking at supporting our students to be able to create, to manage, to communicate and investigate data and information. We're hoping that they can use devices or manage the use of the devices safely and appropriately, and that they can be critically literate as well during this use of technology. A big one is working collaboratively, using digital tools to work together. And of course, the new and probably more emphasis has been placed on this, the protection and safety of themselves and others in digital environments and when using the devices. And there's a big piece that Bruce will cover shortly on the well-being, looking into things like screen time and the use of and misuse of devices. So I think have we got any responses? No, we haven't. So we've got a very shy group, but there's a nice summary for you on the screen.
Oh, here we go. Oh, thanks, Denise. To be digitally literate, students need to be confident using devices, but also need to understand cyber safety, that they are members of a digital community and respectful to other members of the community. I like that. Another term I've heard is digital citizenship to describe some of that stuff, Denise. And I think that's, yeah, I think that's good too.
I think that's excellent. And to summarise, just to finish up there, I think that to be an effective member of our society now, we hope that our students have the digital literacy capabilities to function well, whether it's at work, in future, or at school. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brett. Just a little on the Victorian context then, because, you know, we are probably talking to mostly a Victorian audience here. So what does digital literacy or ICT look like in Victoria now? And this is one area where the Victorian curriculum has differed a little bit from the Australian one, even when you look at the 8.4 version. So if you look at the 8.4 version of the Australian curriculum, you'll see that ICT was a general capability alongside some of the other general capabilities like ethical and social and other sort of thinking. In Victoria, that's not the case. ICT, you can't find it as one of the capabilities, and it's also not one of the cross-curriculum priorities. So where is it? How do schools know where to find it? And we're going to show you in a moment where some of the places where it does pop up. But it seems that there was a different approach taken in Victoria to including ICT, or what we now call digital literacy, in the Victorian curriculum. So yeah, we've got a screenshot here. This is an example for example, history learning area. And if you're in the Victorian curriculum website and you click on just learning in history on the left there, and then scroll down, you get to the bottom of that page, and there's a little bit of stuff on ICT use in history. And you'll find this for the other learning areas as well. There's a PDF there that gives a few examples. The other thing you'll find is that there are specific content descriptors that pop up in different learning areas that actually will say, do this using ICT, or use ICT to do this. So this is the approach that's been taken in Victoria. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the arrival of the new Australian curriculum and Victoria's response to that. So just to kind of summarize what I've been saying there, ICT is not a separate capability in Victoria. Instead, it is sort of embedded in other subjects through their content descriptions, and it also has that sort of reference document for each learning area. We could say that schools have, you know, with it not being explicitly put out as a general capability, some schools perhaps have implemented it more thoroughly or effectively than others. Digital well-being is done. We're aware that digital well-being is kind of covered in lots of different ways at schools through separate little programs, cyber safety programs, or as part of health and PE. You know, proficiency type aspects like being able to use office tools or video tools or things like that are also done in schools in different ways, sometimes by the digital technologies teacher or specialist, and sometimes by the teachers of the subjects using it.
So we thought we'd get underway then, after setting up the context, to talk a little bit about some of the broader changes in the curriculum first. If you've been following along with the other episodes in this webinar series, you'd be aware that we've sort of identified some of these before. The core concepts and the learning areas are specific to how learning areas and subjects are set up now. The breaking out of foundation to have its own band description, content descriptions, and achievement standards is something that's happened right across the board. It turns out that the capabilities already had foundation separate, so that hasn't affected them here. But the big change that's relevant to today's discussion is that the ICT capability has become digital literacy. And the way that that is represented and the links between the subjects and the general capabilities, it's far more explicit. We'll look at some examples of what that looks like and what that means in a moment, but it's actually led to improved elaborations across all of the learning areas and subjects as well. So the changes in the Australian curriculum really have contributed significantly to ensuring that the general capabilities are more visible to teachers, and I think that's a really good thing. There are a few terms that are often confused, and these are used throughout version 9 of the curriculum to provide a little bit more clarity than what we had in version 8. We had digital technologies, ICT, and then digital technologies, but not capitalized to mean different things. And there was a lot of, it was difficult for teachers to navigate exactly what was intended by each of those words. So in version 9, we still got digital technologies. That's the subject within the learning area that has discipline-specific content and skills. That's all about creating with technology. We have digital literacy, which is what we're focusing on today, which encompasses the knowledge and skills students need to create, manage, communicate, and investigate data, information, ideas, and solve problems, all those things that Anna was talking about. And we've got digital tools, and that use of the term digital tools is now new to version 9 and has been taken on board to make it very, very clear that when we're talking about the tools, we're talking about the devices themselves. So this is where in the previous version of the curriculum, you would occasionally see digital technologies with a lowercase d and a lowercase t. But because those words were the same as the ones used to describe the subject, it was often confusing and difficult for teachers to understand exactly whether they were supposed to be referring to the subject or to the technology itself. And so that's been improved, that's been clarified as a result of the adoption of this use of the words digital tools to describe the technology itself. There has also been a significant change to the structure and to the language in the capability. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the reorganization of the elements and how that's fallen out in version 9, and talk about how those links to the learning areas are now visible and more explicit in the way that both the learning areas and the capabilities are written. So in version 8.4, we had 5 elements in the ICT capability, and those were applying social and ethical protocols and practices when using ICT, managing and operating ICT, and then investigating, creating, and communicating with ICT. In version 9, these have been consolidated somewhat. What's happened is the social and ethical protocols and practices, which was kind of a little bit well-being, a little bit technical, kind of difficult to really group together and identify nicely what it was all about. That's been removed, and instead what we've got is we've got practicing digital safety and well-being, really emphasizing that well-being and security and privacy aspect. And then we've still got investigating. We've now merged creating and communicating into creating and exchanging, because communication is largely a creation exercise, but creation with a different audience in mind. And then we've got managing and operating, which is all about how we use the tools. So it's all still there from last time, but the reorganization is actually a little bit cleaner and makes it easier, I think, to guess as a teacher where you're likely to find the relevant skill that you're looking for, because those categories are far more distinct than they were in the old version. This means that we've now got a much stronger emphasis on security and privacy, and that was really identified by teachers through feedback on the review of the curriculum. The ubiquitous nature of online spaces really means that students have to understand how security practices work, the important role of privacy in terms of their digital identity, and so making sure that that element really drew that out was a key part of updating the capability for version 9. There's been significant improvement around the clarity in the statements used to describe the skills and knowledge students need. So the statements for each of the levels of the capability were often in very broad terms. They used superlatives. It made it really difficult for teachers to be able to really understand whether a student was operating at or the level that they were looking at, or one above or one below. And now I think the change in the language that's used in these statements really does help teachers see how the capability itself will translate into either student action or classroom practice when it comes to designing an activity. And the result of all of these things is it's meant that in some learning areas, elaborations are now more easily linked to statements at specific levels within the capability. So in version 8, you would often see that an elaboration had a link to like one of the elements, but it wasn't clear what level of that element was appropriate. And sometimes it also wasn't clear what sub-element was being linked to through that elaboration. Now that's all much clearer to see. And for teachers, that means if you want to see an example of what something might look like in your learning area, you can actually use this version 9 of the Australian Curriculum website to have a look at what an relevant elaboration for your subject might be at that particular level of the capability. So what does that look like? It looks a little bit like this. This is the Manage Online Safety Level 2 statement. And you can see here that there is a little HPE, a little T, and a little A underneath this statement. And if you click on one of these, and in this example, I've decided to show you what happens when you click on the T, what happens is you get this little window pop up on the website that shows you that in technologies, the relevant technology content description for this particular digital literacy sub-element is AC9TDI2P05, which is about using the basic features of common digital tools. And these elaborations here demonstrate not just how that particular content description for the subject is reflected in a classroom activity, but also how that capability would fall out in that learning area. So, you know, being able to do that for the arts or for health and PE, and see which part of the curriculum that you need to explicitly teach as part of the subject learning program you might put together, means that you can be a lot more confident that you're addressing the needs of the general capability, and you're doing that in a meaningful way that's appropriate for the age of the students that you're working with. So I think it's a really positive change. And whilst not every subject or learning area has that mapping in place yet, there are quite a few that do. So you'll see examples of that all through the version 9 Australian Curriculum website that you can use to get a sense of how your subject is represented in each of the capabilities. So we're going to spend a bit of time now for the next little while diving into some of the sub-elements of the capability. And we're going to see how some of the regrouping has been made to align the complementary skills the students need to develop for each of the sub-elements within the capability. We're going to have a look at how the statements have become simpler to make sure that the clarity and the expectations are clearer for teachers, and the progression between levels is also much easier to see. So we'll look at some examples around that as well. And the first one that we're going to look at is practicing digital safety and wellbeing. So there are now 3 sub-elements to this element. And the first of those is managing online safety. That's all about how students address, mitigate, and respond to online risks. We have managing digital privacy and identity. That's all about how they manage their information, the information that is private to them, how they can control that to ensure that their online identity is an accurate reflection of themselves, and what the implications of how they interact online are for their digital footprint. And then finally, the digital wellbeing aspect. And this is all about the impact of using tools and the skills and capabilities that they need to develop over time to ensure that they're able to manage their health and wellbeing in the digital space. So in version 8.4, the closest analog we had to this capability was that ethical and social protocols element in ICT. And if we look at what the expectations were around years 1 and 2 under the sub-elements there, you can see that the statements here about class rules, class guidelines, how ICT is used at home. And there wasn't really a lot about the well-being aspect of how students do this. So there's a little bit there on the misuse of what people create, but there's nothing really talking about the impact that technology use can have on you individually. That's now very explicit and clear in the wellbeing statement, where it's about following agreed rules for the healthy use of digital tools and actually applying them in practice, both at school and at home. And you can see now that there's a statement very, very clearly around the fact that students should be starting to think about personal data and how that data can be used by a tool online to give an impression of what that person is actually like. And there's a little bit there about the practices they should follow to ensure that they are using online tools in a safe way. And those statements are very age appropriate. They've been put together on the basis of a lot of work that the eSafety Commissioner has done on understanding, the demands from parents and the capabilities of students at different age levels. And they've been aligned very closely with the expectations of the digital technologies curriculum as well for each of the band levels chosen. If we want to see the spread and how these things evolve over time, what I've done here is I've taken level 2, which is years 1 and 2 of the of schooling, and level 5, which is year 7 and 8, so we can see how things evolve over time. And obviously there are 6 levels. They start at foundation, they go all the way up to year 9 and 10. But you can see that in year 1 and 2, where students are actually starting to use tools under supervision and have access to adults if they get in trouble, when we're looking at year 7 and 8, there is an expectation that students are a little bit more autonomous, that they can identify when things are not appropriate and that they report that back, and that they're also engaging potentially with authorities or moderators, other people who can sort of help to manage and mitigate those kinds of risks from occurring in the future. So there's a definite increase in expectation there, and the language used makes it very, very clear what that increase or what that difference actually is. With privacy and identity, we go from recognizing what their personal data is to actually understanding why it's valuable and how once something is online, they can no longer really control that with certainty. So it's, the digital footprint goes beyond the basic uses of the data that they've provided, and instead can be used to profile a little bit more, that it can be used for purposes that are not obviously clear from the nature of the data itself. And that control is a really key part of making smart decisions about how you interact online. When it comes to well-being, you can see that in year 1 and 2, it's all about following rules. But by the time you get to year 7 and 8, there's a sort of internalized routine aspect to the way that they manage their own behavior, so that they're actually using tools in constructive ways, and they're balancing the use of their digital tools alongside other things that they're doing in their lives. And that's not just in the digital space, but in the physical space as well. So the statements for digital safety and wellbeing are all visible on the Australian Curriculum version 9 website. It's really nice. You can open up, say, online safety and see the progression from foundation all the way up to year 9 and 10, which is a really nice way of being able to see exactly what that progression looks like year by year. And you can see that by ensuring that all of the statements related to safety are kept together, you don't need to flick between, say, safety and well-being and privacy to get a sense of what the whole picture looks like. That splitting them apart into very discrete sub-elements means that it's much, much easier for you as a teacher to be able to identify how that would feed into activities that you're doing in your classroom.
Bruce, just as we get to the end of the digital safety and well-being, should we take a little pause and see, because that's probably, that's one of the biggest new ones, and see if anyone has any thoughts in the chat or anything anyone wants to ask. Anna, how have you got any thoughts on this first of the 4 subsections?
So I would just reiterate what Bruce has been saying in regard the wellbeing component. I think it's a really valuable addition here, that we now have opportunities for teachers to talk about and, I suppose, provide a little bit more awareness in this space, and particularly in the early years when students are starting to use their devices and perhaps get into situations where, you know, some I suppose communicating in their online spaces where they're being mindful of the way they use language when they're working collaboratively with their friends or their peers, in not ignoring or not leaving people out, and just these conversations that I suppose may have incidentally happened previously now can be, particularly in the primary setting, can be obvious that it's part of the curriculum now, and we have opportunities, we call them teachable moments often, where something will arise and then we'll have a little chat about it. But now there's an expectation that in every year level this is addressed, whether it's happening or not. But I think it's a really fine addition, and particularly, as Bruce mentioned before, that it was sort of something that wasn't that well articulated in version 8.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
No worries. So we'll dive now into the next sub-element, which is investigating. It used to be investigating with ICT. They've kind of dropped the with ICT bit for the new digital literacy capability, because investigation is obviously, you know, if you're in the digital capability, the digital literacy capability, we're obviously talking about it in the context of that. So investigating has a few parts. These are fairly similar to the ones that were present in version 8. So it's locating information, and that's really just about being able to identify where to get and how to curate information from online sources, and the skills required to actually navigate and do that effectively. Acquire and collate data is all about both generating their own data and understanding how to select the right data from online sources, and then pull it together in a meaningful way. And then interpret the data, which is about analysing and visualising data, and doing so in contexts to support problem solving and decision making in the learning areas and the subjects involved. And I think we were having a chat just before this webinar began, and Anna, I know, pointed out that, you know, one of the things that you really need to be thinking about with these general capabilities is how to contextualise them for the learning that's happening in the classroom at the time, whether that's in a subject or in a sort of integrated or transdisciplinary program. The fact that, you know, all of these things need to be contextualized means that the links to the learning areas that are now visible through those elaborations, I think, are really, really powerful for the capabilities. So in version 8.4, the sub-element names were much longer. Define and plan information searches, that's kind of been pulled into a little bit of acquire. The select and evaluate data is acquire, collate and interpret. Locate, generate and access data and information was kind of a little bit of find, a little bit of select, a little bit of create. And so those groupings didn't actually make those 3 steps in the process really, really clear. They were kind of mashed together a bit. So this example here is from year 3-4. But you can see that, you know, when we locate information, we've pulled specifically just that identification of where data is and actually extracting it through the use of, in this case, search engines, in documents by using search terms, and those other sort of skills that we would expect students to be able to do across different sources, so that they can be confident they've got the information they need to address a problem or to work towards an answer to a question.
Can I just jump in there, Bruce, for a minute? And it's not as obvious in that statement there, but Bruce just mentioned it in relation to using search engines and searching. I think in the early years, this is the perfect opportunity to explicitly teach students how to conduct an effective search. And often we just assume that they know, or that somehow someone else is doing this. And I think that's a skill and an explicit an opportunity to explicitly teach that and go through some examples, and it could be in history, it could be in geography, wherever they are actually looking and locating information, and to also be critically literate, because we know when young people are searching, the wealth of information available to them, how do we ensure that they understand that not all of the information is credible? And these are the types of things that sit in this element or sub-element, particularly in that locating information. Sorry, Bruce.
No, that's good. And, you know, you can see once we've found that data, the intention then is to actually collect it, bring it all together, and make sure that we're doing so in response to a defined question in this case. And then when we interpret that, the way we organize it, the way we summarize it, the way we visualize it, that all has to have some kind of digital element for the purposes of this capability. But it's also about making sure that we're addressing a question. So this isn't something that you can do in isolation. It really does have to be in the context of something that a student is learning. Now, if we look at how this evolves from year 1, 2 up to this is year 9, 10. I've got a typo on this slide, Nathan, that I missed. But this is all the way up to year 9 and 10 with level 6. You can see that we begin by just using search engines and search terms. We eventually get to the point where we're actually using advanced search functions, and we're using multiple sources, and some of those sources are context specific. So, you know, if you're looking for a research paper, you're now using Google Scholar or library databases that are hooked into, you know, research publications and things like that. If we look at acquire and collate, we go from, you know, counting and measuring and using things that we're familiar with in year 1 and 2, all the way through to actually evaluating quantitative and qualitative data using tools that are specifically designed for that purpose. And then when we're interpreting things, we go from classifying and grouping things together to actually looking at data that has multidimensional elements. So, you know, we're trying to be interactive with this data. We're looking at how we can manipulate it or examine it through different lenses to actually draw different conclusions or to make predictions about what may happen, and then testing those hypotheses. There's a significant difference between what these expectations look like in the early years through to the later years. Now, the other thing I might just quickly mention here is you'll notice that I've included level 2 for all of these slides, not level 1. And that is because not every sub-element of the capability is actually represented in Foundation. One of the things that was done as part of breaking Foundation out across the entire curriculum, instead of it living in F2 in some subjects, was to make sure that the amount of content that was expected at that, you know, first year of schooling in prep in Victoria was appropriate, and that same exercise has been done with the capabilities as well. So there is a level 1 for some aspects of the capability, but not for all of them. And so for the purposes of these slides, to do these direct comparisons, I chose to start with level 2 instead of level 1. But there is definitely stuff in there for prep, but it is a subset of the expectations that would be there for every other band or every other level in the capability. So the big change between 8 and 9 was really that merging of create and communicate. And so what's happened now is I think the terms are actually far simpler in this version of the curriculum. We've now got just plan, which takes into account all of the preparation involved in actually going ahead with creating something, following a process to do that, understanding any constraints that might be associated with that process. We then have merged create, communicate, and collaborate together. That's all about how we execute our plan and understanding which tools are appropriate for what types of collaboration and interaction we have with others. And then the intellectual property aspect that used to live in social and ethical aspects of ICT lives here in creating and exchanging, because a lot of where we need to understand and engage with intellectual property questions is about when we go to create or go to share or go to communicate something. So this is really a much more logical place for this understanding of intellectual property to sit, because it's not just about making sure that you use other people's content in appropriate ways, but also that when you're creating content, you're doing so and being very clear about how you expect that content to be used. So this includes things like, publishing things under Creative Commons licenses if you want other people to be able to use your content in specific ways. That all fits inside the intellectual property aspect of this element. Now, if we compare the two, so remember I said we had create and communicate with ICT. If we compare how that is sort of translated over to version 9, you can see that the generating of ideas and solutions is now all pulled into create, communicate, and collaborate. There's a lot more here that is specific to digital literacy that doesn't try to sort of cover some of the aspects that would be present in creating digital solutions in digital technologies. It's worth pointing out that when version 8 of the curriculum was written, or the first version of the Australian curriculum was written, whether or not digital technologies was going to live as a separate subject was unknown at the time that the ICT capability was written. So there were some things in the ICT general capability that eventually were better placed in digital technologies. And the nice thing about rewriting both the subject and the capability in this version of the curriculum is a lot of that sort of conflict or difference in language has been able to be sorted out. And so the statements here in version 9 very much reflect just that general use of ICT and how it applies across other learning areas in the curriculum. And that's really clear from the statements. So, planning now is about, if we look at year 5 and 6, it's about selecting and using tools and working out how those might change if you're working on your own compared to if you're working with others. Creating, communicating, and collaborating is all about selecting the tools you want and doing so on the basis of the features that are appropriate for either the creation, the communication, or the collaboration task that you're involved with. And you can see that there's a qualifier here to trusted groups. So for year 5 and 6, it's very much about collaborating or communicating only to people that you're familiar with. And that's actually intentionally written that way because it aligns with the expectations around digital safety and privacy and things like that in the digital safety and wellbeing element in version 9. And finally, as far as intellectual property is concerned, for year 5 and 6, it's about understanding what the various licenses or statements around copyright that might be associated with content that you're using are, so that you are making the right decision about how you should be using the data, the product, whatever it is that you're looking at the IP for. You begin to do some referencing and you begin to make smart choices about whether it's appropriate for inclusion in the thing that you're creating. So how does that change from year 1 to year 10? Quite substantially. In year 1, it's really just about saying, how can I contribute to a plan? What tools allow me to do that? In year 9 and 10, it's about actually starting to use some more formal project management type tools, not just to develop your plan, but to actually track where you're at. So you're constantly coming back to that plan in senior years to determine whether or not you're actually progressing at the rate that you were expecting to do so. In year 1 and 2, it's all about experimentation, but doing so with tools that you already understand. In year 9 and 10, it's actually a lot more about ensuring that you're not just using tools appropriately and you're doing so with the purpose clearly identified in your head, but that you're also starting to be inclusive of diverse groups, that you understand that for different people, different communication mechanisms might be more appropriate. And so when you're actually creating something and then looking at how you can get that information out there or that product out there, you're making smart decisions about how you need to adjust or design it in such a way that as many people as possible can engage with your finished product. And then finally, when it comes to IP, you're actually starting to reference the conventions that you're using, the protocols, and you're starting to also think about the ethical implications of the decisions you're making, not just the legal ones. Now, the final element that we're going to look at before I start looking at some explicit examples, or I pass to Anna to do that, is managing and operating. And this has a much more direct relationship with managing and operating from version 8. The difference is we've actually got protecting content being called out here, just like privacy was given a sort of more prominent position in the well-being element of this capability. Security has a much more prominent place in managing and operating. So managing content is how you interact with data. Protecting content is how you identify and mitigate against security threats. And a lot of that is about adopting good cyber practices yourself or sharing those practices with involving others in that. And then selecting and operating tools is really how you select and troubleshoot the tool that you want to use, and understanding how the functions and features, not just of hardware, but of software as well, will allow you to achieve your goal in an effective way. If we look at level 2 or years 1 and 2, around the old version of this, the select and use hardware and software really sort of is a one-to-one relationship almost to selecting and operating tools. And so you can see this is about using the familiar tools that you have and attempting to solve a problem before you seek help. That second one has actually come across directly from this same statement in version 8, but you'll see that use familiar digital tools to complete tasks and consolidate learning is a much cleaner and clearer statement than the first half of that statement was in the previous version. Managing content and managing digital data is essentially the same sub-element, but you can see that instead of it just being managing data with guidance, there's an expectation in years 1 and 2 that you are using an agreed name for content so that you can both save it and retrieve it. And so these are a lot more tangible, these descriptions, when it comes to managing content throughout this, this element of the capability. And I think that's a really good thing, because when you're saying maintain digital data with guidance, it's really hard to understand what type of data that you're talking about. And if you can start actually specifying what kind of conventions you want students to apply at different levels, it's much, much clearer for teachers to set those expectations for all of the things students should do. So what this means is that from as early as year 1, when students are submitting digital work to the teacher, then there's an expectation they should be able to name their files appropriately. And if they're working on something that they need to come back to in a later lesson, having an agreed approach to actually structuring the name of that file means that they can go back to it again. And it's those little things that will enable students to gradually build up the skills they need in their toolkit to be able to work with far more complicated systems and technologies.
Can I make a comment there too, Bruce, which is something that I like to remind teachers of, and that's in the early years, particularly when we are expecting students to save some of their information. And it's again, another teaching opportunity. Who's going to teach them about their nomenclature, the file directory, the difference between save and save as, creating folders? These things need to be explicitly taught somewhere. And I think it's often an assumption that they just know how to do these things. So again, this is a perfect opportunity coming under the managing and operating when we're looking at managing content, and those I think are particular expectations in primary settings, particularly in even year 1 and 2, maybe even prep.
So the other one that's in version 8 was understanding ICT systems, and really a lot of that now lives in digital technologies. It's been much clearly stated in the systems core concept in the digital technology subject what those expectations are from foundation all the way up to year 10. So instead what we have is this protect content statement, and you can see that the statement used here for year 1 and 2 really is appropriate for what is the sort of standard day-to-day type context that for most students is going to be present at school. And this is probably the first time they're going to start to regularly and reliably use their own school account. So making sure students are saving stuff associated with their ID so that it's secure, and it can't be accessed by other people or changed by other people, is something that students should be able to start doing as soon as they begin using their own account on the school system. And that's exactly how many of these protect content statements have come together. It's been done in the context of what the typical usage of technology is going to look like in that particular year level at school. So we've already had a look at the level 2 or the year 1 and 2 content. You can see that for year 9 and 10, you're actually starting to incorporate version history. You're backing data up so that you can access things or edit things from multiple devices, and you can recover stuff in the case of something going missing or getting deleted. When we're protecting content, we're actually starting to identify the rules around sharing and access that we might use, and we're starting to think about access control groups and individuals and who should have access and what level of access they should have. And when it comes to operating tools, there's actually an expectation that they've built up the disposition over many, many years to actually feel confident working with emerging technology. So, they're able to troubleshoot by stepping through systematic processes they've developed. They can identify where they need to expand on their skills to be able to use something more effectively. And by doing all of these things, stuff that was previously unfamiliar, they're going to be more likely to want to experiment with and to feel comfortable doing so. And the more students are able to do this, the more powerful their learning opportunities are going to be with technology as that continues to evolve into the future. So, Anna, we're going to spend a little bit of time now for the remainder actually looking at what digital literacy, how it presents in the classroom. And we've got some examples of digital literacy in action that I know you're keen to share with the people present today. But before you do that, I guess it's worth just sharing a little bit what the digital literacy demands in the learning areas are. So I'll throw to you for that.
Thanks, Bruce. And look, I think it's really important, and it was, I think, Suzanne who mentioned how it is everybody's business. It's much like numeracy and literacy. There are opportunities throughout all learning areas, and if you're a teacher in secondary and you are teaching mathematics or science, etc., there are expectations, and we call them the digital literacy demands of that learning area. So if you have a look, for example, in English, the assumption is that our students are going to be creating texts, they're going to be sharing texts, they may be collaboratively working on particular texts. There's opportunities there for development in digital capabilities, digital literacy. Again, I used an example earlier with Nathan. We were talking about in science when students are using data loggers, or when they are collecting or collating information, analysing data. That is a digital literacy capability and a demand for that learning area. There's a whole range in humanities, geography, when we're looking at Google Earth, we're looking at using GPS technologies, spatial technologies, as you can see the list there. Now, of course, the arts, all of the opportunities in media arts for creating digital content in editing movies, creating short clips. HPE, I'm going to share a couple of examples with you this afternoon in what that might look like, particularly when students are collecting data for their own personal health programs and looking at recording data for particular well-being or I suppose physical fitness activities. So look, that's just a very quick snapshot of, and this has come straight from the Australian curriculum learning areas where digital technologies, digital literacy has been highlighted. So that's just an overview of what that might look like for you if you are a teacher of one of those disciplines. And then moving to the next example. Now, this is what I've tried to do is get a bit of a range and balance across the learning areas and the year levels. So this is an example of digital literacy in Year 8 in science. Now, these students actually were going to, in the future, dissect a toad. They were investigating a question, is there a super toad? Now, there's a very cool app called Frogopedia, and they were also able to not just use the app, but through, you can see the use of the AR and VR experience there, they were able to do all of this fun stuff before they got to do the real cutting of the frog. And I mentioned to Bruce earlier, whilst this is a digital literacy example, these students actually did then spend some time at the University of Queensland looking at some data sets and doing a little bit of programming and coding, which then was a lovely alignment into the digital technologies curriculum. But if we go to the next slide, Bruce, I think we've got an example here of, so this was where they were using Frogopedia, the actual app, using their iPads to do the dissection virtually. And this is a very cool app. If you haven't seen it, you can actually toggle from the dissection to a section where you actually can take out the body organs of the frog, and there's a lot of information there that they can learn and I suppose do lots of fun things before they get to the real cutting of the frog. So there's an example, Year 8 biology and digital literacy. And I think if we go to the next example, Bruce, we're down to the primary years now, Year 4, and this is a particular content description within the history curriculum. And this is one of the examples that I've used also when we talk about digital technologies, but we'll focus on digital literacy here, because when the students are learning about the convicts and who were the convicts, who were the people that came over on the First Fleet, there's a great opportunity, and some of you might already know about it. The convict database is an excellent database that has all of the factual information about the convicts, what they were transported here for, how old they were. Lots of opportunities for students to just navigate a database, and the digital literacy, and not just and in English, the actual literacy and the looking for information, locating information, navigating, conducting a search. This is a really good example, but if you were looking at digital technologies here, then you could go a little bit further and you could have some context for creating a Scratch program or a code to, I suppose, find out what your peers know about what they've learned. And the little example there is, was there punishment, or what was the punishment for murder? And this was just an example of a student's Scratch program. And the next one I think might be another secondary. Yes, this is a Year 8 geography example, and I saw this in action a few weeks ago at a school where the Year 8 students were investigating in geography landforms, and in particular this was volcanoes, and they had to actually understand the components or the actual features of a volcano. They were given an opportunity to present their understanding either using Lego or some digital tools. And this particular example, there's two there. One boy was working in Canva and the other was in a simulated environment where he was able to create his example. And that's just a perfect opportunity where students are in geography but having digital literacy experiences as well. And the last one here is a Year 8 HPE, and this is, I think, quite a fun one, because as you can see, I went straight to the HPE curriculum, the version 9, and you can see here that the students are expected to participate in physical activities, but then investigate the impact of regular participation in health, fitness and well-being. And then you can see the digital literacy component using digital tools to design their physical activity programs and to perhaps record data. And this is just some Fitbit data used from a Fitbit. I love the fact that this could also be used for literacy, actually looking at or comprehending what do we know about this person, how can we tell what this person's up to, can we look at some of this data that we've got from the Fitbit. There's so many opportunities, not just in HPE here, but in other learning areas as well, to have a bit of fun with that. I think that's come to the end of our examples there, but I'll just finish off by saying there are a whole heap of ways that teachers can use the digital technologies, digital literacy capability in authentic ways, as Bruce mentioned earlier. So it's not just we're going to learn how to use the data logger today. You really need to be thinking about the authentic purpose for that digital literacy capability.
Thanks, Anna. And I think it's worth us, if you're, sitting here and you're thinking, yep, I get this, I understand all of these differences, but I've got colleagues at my school that still don't get it. One of the things that you might find useful is we've got this fantastic activity called Digital Technologies or Digital Literacy. It's a series of cards that essentially have a whole heap of different, aspects of either digital literacy or digital technologies on them. You give that set to staff, you get them to categorize them which way they think, and on the back there's a bit of an explanation as to whether or not and why something is digital technologies or digital literacy. So it really gives you a mechanism through which you can start having some of these discussions with staff and actually begin to help them understand that there is a role that every teacher in the school has to play around ensuring students build this digital literacy capability, that it doesn't really live in digital technologies, although there are some things that do overlap. And so, whilst there's some explicit teaching going on, the simple fact is a lot of this stuff can't be taught in just one learning area, and everyone needs to bear some of the responsibility associated with its delivery. So, Nathan, we're going to finish up now with a bit of a chat about what the implications for Victoria might be. And I guess the big questions are how we might see it reflected and who's going to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, these are really just sort of like questions that you're left with at the end of the movie, like there's not really a lot to say other than I guess we'll have to see. But one thing I have been saying is that regardless of whether your school teaches Victorian or Australian curriculum, I think it is really useful to at least have a look at the digital literacy general capability in the Australian curriculum, partly because it might be a hint of what might be coming down the track, but also because it does sort of crystallize some of the things that schools are already trying to do. And, just by using external programs or cyber safety days or whatever else they do, it helps to crystallize some of that together. So, yeah, just something to think about, I guess, these questions as you go today. We do thank you all for coming. And I want to give huge thanks to Bruce and Anna. They've put a lot of work into this presentation today. It's been great. Yeah, the whole series, we hope that it's been useful to you. And yeah, just big thanks from DLTV and from me. Did you have any final things you wanted to say, Anna and Bruce?
No, I just want to say thank you to the teachers that turned up this afternoon. Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock, a big ask for those of you that have been teaching. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for your participation.
Yeah, and all I'd say is just a reminder that, as Nathan said earlier, all of the videos are going to be available on the DLTV YouTube channel. So we'll grab the recording from here, and I'm sure Nathan will get it up nice and quick so that you can share it with colleagues, and if they missed out and
that's right,
them to it, it will be free and easily accessible on that channel. Correct, Nathan?
That's right. I'll put the link one more time just in case anyone missed it before. But yeah, otherwise, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time. But we'll finish the recording here. Thanks.